welcome to Spooky Butt. I'm joined today in Spooky Butt Studio with Sarah Infranco. Sarah operates as Sarah's Intuitive Work. She is a psychic, medium, Reiki healer, designer, and more. She is currently creating content and working with clients one-on-one, virtually, on Etsy, and in San Francisco. She considers herself a practical medium, using her native New York mentality and corporate background to target the root cause of client problems and level with them about how they can tangibly achieve their goals. Sarah, oh my God, welcome to Spooky Butt.
Yay! Oh my God, the cadence of your voice is so nice. Just an FYI, not to break the wall, but that was beautiful. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, one of my friends who is a guest on this show, she's a voice actress, so I was able to take a lesson with her. So thank you so much. And I'll pass that info along to her as well.
Yeah, she's a pro.
So first and foremost, I want to let listeners at home know that Sarah and I have been working together, I think, almost 4 years. It's been a minute. So I work with Sarah virtually, and I kind of go in every time I need like what I consider a sort of metaphysical tune-up. Like if I'm, encountering any resistance in my spiritual journey or anything like that, or if stuff's just kind of like weird and the vibes are off, I like to check in with Sarah. And one other thing I do want to point out is that I have literally gone virtually running to Sarah crying, and she's handled it perfectly. I've had a couple of weird times these past couple of years. But yeah, it's always been so great to just like check in with you, level with you. And again, like you said, you're like a practical person. So it's nice to just get that direct contact instead of a lot of the kind of like flowery and like woo-woo stuff. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's awesome. And I mean, feel free to edit this out if you want, if I'm giving too much information away, but you, I feel like, are such a great client. You're so receptive to kind of things that I have to say. And I think just for folks listening, your journey has been amazing. Like, I feel like you're raising your vibration, and now you're starting, doing this podcast. There's so much growth that I've kind of observed from your process, and so a lot of kudos to you. And I think that's the thing I appreciate most in clients, just that sense of receptivity. And I feel like you take everything in and you really digest it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, that's great, because it's also like, I want to do this. I want to work with you, and of course, like paying for a service. Like, yes, it's an investment, but I also have to invest in myself afterwards. It's not just like a one and done. It's like, hey, here are tools you need to take with you, and here's how to implement that in your life.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Right. So I think my first question is, like, when did your gifts appear? Has this been like an all life thing, or was this something that kind of happened later? Like, when did this all start?
Yeah, I know. I love this question, because anytime I see kind of like a professional medium on TV, they're like, oh, my gift started when I was like 4 years old. And it's just been, and I'm just like, I wish, really, man, I really wish, because I think that would be a much more, I don't know if that would be more gentle, because I think that would be really difficult to kind of deal with as a kid. But, my intuition didn't open up until my late 20s, which is, now that I'm kind of on TikTok, I feel like I'm observing a few more folks in the same position, but I consider that extremely unusual, just like not having really a sense of intuition. And I mean, really not. Not at all. Maybe there's like one or two things I look back on, but I'm like, no, nothing. And it really opened up kind of when I moved to California. So gosh, I don't know what that was. Maybe like a year-ish into it. So 7-ish years ago. And it was very startling. That was something I didn't necessarily ask for or anticipate. And it took me by surprise. Needless to say, I think there were a few things, just, in case anyone's listening and they're curious. Gosh, what was like the first thing that happened? I think the weirdest, most random and obtrusive thing that was happening was that I was starting to have what either was a legitimate panic attack or something that seemed like a panic attack. And it would happen a lot on public transportation in particular. Whenever I was like very like crowded and cornered, and like there wasn't a lot of airflow. And what was weird about that is that, I'm not really claustrophobic. Like, it's not like I'm nervous about people or the train in and of itself. So like there was really no logic in it. A couple of other things that were happening was that I would kind of like close my eyes and there would just be a picture that kind of flashes. And it was always random. It would be like a pineapple or like a magazine cover or something like that. And it would be very nonsensical. And so, I was like, okay, I guess things are just weird in California. And I don't know. I didn't really figure out what exactly was going on. And then I think things started to kind of like ramp up where like the visions, and they were all in my own mind. I wasn't seeing anything like, and I actually thought about it before I kind of jumped on here. I'm like, when it comes to my psychic ability, nothing is really, which is ironic, tangible, the word tangible, it's all in my mind's eye or my mind's kind of voice in essence. Like there's nothing that I'm seeing or hearing, with exception to my spooky story, which I'll share with you later. Everything is really inside of me, so what does that mean? How do you discern that? Is that your imagination? Is that, something's really going on? I think for a while I was really concerned that I was suffering from mental illness, because of course, when you start Googling any combination of things, even if it's like 3 out of the 4 things and it's just like, or you change like the 4th thing, then you got a new diagnosis, so obviously, that was not my best friend, but, anyway, okay, so back to that. The vision, so to speak, or the imagination started kind of like amplifying. And then I started to kind of just get like gut feelings about things. Like I remember being in my my 9-to-5 office at the time, and I was like, I feel like she's going through something weird, like the girl who's sitting next to me. And, I think more weird things started to happen, or I had a feeling about something that kind of like turned out to be right, but not necessarily in like a prophecy kind of way. So I think that was the struggle, was like, it's not like I had a dream where something happened and then it really happened. It was so fluid and ambiguous, and there wasn't really much going on. And so I think it got to a point where it really started to ramp up. So like the panic, the visions, and the feelings. And I was like, okay, either I have mental illness or, I have some type of other ability. And the only reason I didn't seek professional help for it was because I did a little Googling, again, back to that. And it was like, if things are very negative, that will really be a problem for you. And I'm like, I don't think these things are really that negative. I think they're just kind of neutral and maybe positive in some situation. If I get a feeling about someone, I'm able to kind of connect and resonate with them. So what I did was I ended up joining a community in East Bay. And there was this woman I saw who was kind of like an intuitive life coach. She had a lot of different like intuitive classes where you would like practice certain things, just sort of like, what's it called? Like psychometry, when you're kind of like reading objects, like just other, like there was like past life things as well. So lots of different intuitive modalities. And as I started to kind of work through it, I was like, oh, okay, there's something here. Like there's something that is actually connecting and resonating with other folks. And so I just kind of went with it. And then, it was a while. It took a couple or a few years until I finally felt relatively confident that what I was experiencing was supernatural, but positive. And, there's some type of good or some type of connection resonation I can do with this or work with this. And so, yeah, it was not fun. It was not fun. That was a little bit of a drawn out answer, but it was not fun to have intuition open up in your 20s, because that spiritual awakening was a crash of my ego, of my belief system, my perspective, my point of view. I think a lot of people may take for granted that their perception of the world and reality, or their religious belief, whatever it may be, is at least true to them at that point in time. And to have that just smashed immediately, or seemingly almost immediately, is so disorienting. I can see how that leads to like a really strong break in people, especially even just folks who are having just really, really intense, painful, and traumatic things happen to them. You really take for granted how connected you are to your own sense of reality until that drops or stops. So that was really That was really unpleasant. That's circling back to the original point. That's why I think it might have been easier for my intuition to open up when I was younger. I think growing with it would have had a more peaceful connection and relationship with it, because there was a lot of kind of anger and angst, because I was like, I'm doing fine. I don't need this stuff coming in. Like,
Yeah.
for anyone who's just kind of like thinks that psychics and mediums are taking advantage of folks, I was like, no. I didn't need any of this. I was doing fine. I was doing well. There was no reason for me to go into this zone to make money or do anything like that. This wasn't a necessary part of my life at the time. So, yeah. So that's the gist of it.
Wow. And so like the gifts and whatnot kind of started showing up. Was it pretty soon after you moved across the country to San Francisco?
Yeah. And it was, I ended up moving to California because I was in a long-term relationship with someone, and he ended up getting a job in around the Sacramento area. And we had been together for a while, and it was just kind of like, all right, now is sort of the time to do the thing. And so I left my spot in Brooklyn, and I moved out there. And what was just kind of odd at the time, there was a lot of weird synchronicities like going on. But I ended up not being able to find a job in Sacramento. And I was like, my ego was coming in. I'm like, all right, I'm kind of qualified for these jobs. Like, what the heck is going on here? Why can I not sort of get a job? But when I was driving to California, I got a call in Texas. So halfway there, right? And they offered me this great job. It was a job at Sephora in San Francisco, and it was to do design work for them. And I'm like, I got to take advantage of this. I got to get this job. And so I accepted it. And he was not a fan of that happening, I think, because he wanted me to kind of live with him and start a life with him, because we had been long distance for a while. And so, I get it. But because of that, I ended up moving closer to San Francisco, and we virtually had a similar situation happen. We were kind of still in a long distance relationship. And, I think that I sometimes do wonder if like the intuition, which showed up probably maybe like 6 months to a year after I moved there, was partially to kind of change my life in some way, shape, or form. I think that relationship could have resulted easily in a marriage, and I don't think that was ultimately my destiny. So part of me wonders if the intuition sort of came in to be like, you need to stop this. You need to go on a different path. You need to do something different. So that's like theory number one of why that kind of happened. Theory number two is I have no idea. Yeah, that's really it. But I would say it's hard to know exactly when, but I would say around 6 months to a year. I mean, when I first got to San Francisco, I will say, like, literally I drove there, and I was with my friend. I did visit Alcatraz in terms of like a touristy kind of thing. And I think that there was something that I was like, I'm feeling a little panicky in here, and no one else seems panicky. So, maybe technically it was when I touched down in California, but in terms of me picking up on those clues, I would say it was like 6 months to a year. But yeah, so whether it had something to do with me needing to re-strategize and re-trajectory my life, or it was just California, or it was just random, I'm not entirely sure.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild, because it's like, you move across the country, you have this relationship that's not going, the way you thought it was going to go. And then on top of that, it's your Saturn return. And then, hey, you're psychic now. Here you go.
Yeah. It's starting a new job. And it was a very demanding job too. And I was not well. Cause also I'm in my 20s. So I'm not, I don't have the most healthy habits, right? Like I've still got coping mechanisms, because I, as most people do, did not have the best upbringing for a variety of different reasons. Just, I think not even necessarily my family structure, although I think that was part of it, but also just environmentally. Like I feel like I was kind of born wrong place, wrong time. So, I'm retroactively dealing with kind of like my adolescent trauma, and then exactly all of the things that you mentioned. And I think that's why I was really angry, because I'm just like, is this like, what is going on? But of course, now in hindsight, it opening up, it was really like a break in the case for me. And I think really a door open and an opportunity to do something new. So as much as it was just like pile on, I ultimately am grateful for it. But I will say that, you know, it's hard to label it as traumatic to have your intuition opening up, but I don't really know what else to call it, because I was in therapy for a few years after, and there were still things I was kind of like sort of thinking back to and like speaking about. And it was rough. It was rough to go through that, because again, just all of the sorts of things where it being so disorienting and so shocking and startling. It's not exactly fun to, wake up and experience something that is like supernatural, or, just kind of have that. It's very obtrusive to go throughout your daily day and sort of like get impressions and sort of not feel like your body is yourself as well. So there's so many different like elements and aspects, and a lot that I've even like forgotten about just because I've kind of wanted to either push it away or just get through it. But I honestly feel like now, as in like present moment, which it's, been arguably 6-7 years, I think I've finally kind of released a lot of the negativity surrounding that situation, which is good, because ultimately I do feel it's a gift and there's a much more positive spin on it, if you will.
Right. So are there any psychics or intuitives or anything like that in your family line?
Okay, so I was actually just thinking about this. We're on the same wavelength, because I think I'm convinced, and this is like, when you have like really strong, like deep gut feelings, I think it's from my dad's side of the family.
Okay.
I think no one is a psychic. I can tell you that much. We're all native New Yorkers. No one in their right mind would consider this as not even just a possibility in some way, shape, or form. I've even had kind of like mediumship sessions where my grandpa would come through and he'd be like, I have no idea how you ended up here, how you ended up in this family line. Because again, we're all, and my family is New York. If you think about it, like, they all grew up in Brooklyn, with the exception of my grandma. Gosh, my grandpa, my family was NYPD. They worked MTA. Wow. My grandpa drove a bus in New York. He was security guard at Trump Tower before Trump became who he was, wow. Which I always think about. I'm like, I should tap in. Like, I don't think he would ever believe what's going on with him now, because he was just, he was just kind of a businessman and a reality show star at the time. But and my great grandpa and my family members, they were welders. They helped build New York bridges. Wow. So we are thorough New Yorkers, and that, I think, with that sense of kind of grit and needing to survive, because there was a lot of, as I think in most families, going through Great Depression and other things like that, there's a lot of survival coping mechanisms and a lot of grit, at that point in time. And also, our culture, our Western culture, like it's just not the vibe. It's not the New York vibe. Mm-hmm. It's not really the Western culture vibe. So even if someone was intuitive, I would have to imagine for survival purposes, that would have been repressed long time ago. But I do, so that's more so my mom's side of the family. And then my dad's side, while my grandpa was, native New Yorker, my grandma was from Iowa, and I think it started with her or before her, because she was religious, not in what I say quote unquote a negative sense, but like she was just spiritual. Like she gave back, she volunteered, she was Christian, but more in the community sense. Like she's always giving back. And even kind of my dad as well, just like giving back to the church and with donations and just, I don't know, just working to be a good person. So they both have this very spiritual sort of element and aspect. And then I think, her sense of spirituality probably passed on to them. And my dad, I am convinced he was a low-key psychic, but I think because he was a man and he was growing up in New York and he was very sensitive, again, it just was not a conducive environment. So I think like, he kind of here and there would say he would experience things. Like, I think maybe he would like wake up in the middle of the night. I remember this story he was saying, and he heard kind of like speaking in the kitchen or just kind of like rumblings around. And that was it. You know what I mean? So it would just be like little things here and there. But what's also interesting is that during my intuition opening up, which also I realized this was partly something I experienced, I had this like weird tingling sensation in my hands. And I was like, God, this is so weird. And I ended up actually seeing a neurologist for it because I thought I had a medical, I really did, thought I had a medical condition. And years go on from that point. And he was just like, one time talking to me, he's like, Sarah, you're going to think I'm like crazy, but like, I've got like, I feel like tingling in my hands. I'm like, the exact same thing happened to me. What are you talking about? And so like, I think that he was kind of working with this like sense of Reiki. There would even be points where like he had this very innate knowledge in a weird way. Like before he, would even know anything about like Reiki, for example, I'd be like, okay, I have like a headache. And he would be like, okay, like my energy will help your energy. And he would put his hand kind of like on my head and it would work. And I was just like, damn. And then, later on, years later, I ended up becoming certified in Reiki. And I was like, that was kind of Reiki. So it was just like all of these like really small things where, no one is talking to ghosts. No one is having prophecies. But I actually kind of love that because I think that really means that as a culture and a society, we're moving into a place where spirituality is more integrated. You know what I mean? It's not a woman who's behind a crystal ball, in a shop that is a psychic. We're all kind of low key psychic and we have different gifts and abilities and we're working with them. And, even just going back to my story, it was so not obvious that I didn't even know what it was. So I think that there's little kind of like hints here and there. And, maybe things for him would have been a lot different if he was also in a more conducive environment. That clearly is a theme for my family. And maybe not, I don't really know. And maybe same for me. Maybe if I was in a more conducive environment, I would be the 4-year-old medium on TV that's talking about how that's when my gifts opened up. But I also love it because I think that all of us had the opportunity to live a quote unquote normal life, where we just kind of did what we wanted to do and we had these spiritual elements. And granted, now I'm doing it in a more overt way, but I don't know, there's something cool about this like sense of like latent spirituality or just kind of like undercurrent of spirituality where the coolness is that you live, like I feel like I've lived multiple lives. I've lived as, I was about to say the word corporate baddie as if I can actually like declare myself as that, but like as like a corporate girl, as a New York girl, as a California girl, as like a normal girl, quote unquote, and then as like a spiritual girly too. And I think that, I have a Gemini midheaven. So I think maybe that was just like always part of my destiny, but why not? Why not do 100 million things in one lifetime? Why not have, crossover? Why not have specific non-spiritual things? Why not have overtly spiritual things? Like, I don't know. I just love this idea of there being flexibility and like fluidity with the sense of spirituality. I think that's really cool. And I think it's really helpful because that means that folks can resonate with spirituality a lot more. And it's not so specific or like outlandish or scary or like disconnected. And, even just like in my journey, I remember when I was in those like practice classes that I was talking about in East Bay, there were most of the people who showed up is who you would not think would show up. I mean, there was like tech leadership. There were like executives that were more talented mediums than me. So I think that like, we kind of assume that those folks aren't out there. And the thing is they are. And I think they just don't really have an opportunity to speak about it, or they don't have an outlet for it, or they're just like me where maybe the environment isn't conducive to the cause. I think there's so many different reasons, but I think a sense of spirituality is more pervasive, but perhaps for any particular reason, we're either not utilizing it, we're not understanding it and picking up on it, or I don't know, maybe there's just not a use case for it that we're aware of. But I'm loving how now things are so different. And, tarot readings are, anybody will open up their TikTok algorithm and they'll see stuff like that. They'll see spiritual integration, astrology integration. Like it's very cool to see how enmeshed things are and can be. And maybe I'll have a different opinion tomorrow about that, but I think for the time being, it's really helpful for what I'm trying to do because there's a lot of receptivity towards it.
Right. And I think kind of what you were saying earlier, I think one of the reasons why you're so successful at what you do is because you had that kind of like normal background, and that makes you so much more approachable because like, and I don't mean to disparage anyone. Well, we can even talk about like, the woman behind the crystal ball, like on the boardwalk or whatever, who was like literally insane. And that's kind of, turn of the century imagery, but that's what people typically think of when they think of like psychics, mediums, that sort of thing. So it's so nice to talk with someone who can just kind of like level with you and speak to you in a professional way. Someone who kind of has that corporate conditioning, I guess, like in a very good way. So that's awesome. Cause it's so cool. Cause it makes spirituality and just the fantastic way more digestible.
I love that. I love that you also called me successful, such a grandiose term for my little business. But and I think I have a Capricorn stellium, which I think also helps. And, as much as, my dad was really like an artist in his own sense, my mom really the OG corporate baddie. And I think that is what kind of influenced me. Like she was an accountant, and she was working at a time where she was pretty much like the only woman like in her office. And not only that, maybe there was like a couple of other ones. There was such overt sexism. Like she would talk about times where, people would say straight to her face, "You're not allowed to come to this particular meeting or this experience because look at you, you're a woman type of thing." And she kind of worked her way up the ranks. And despite kind of the sexism and just like, not even like, I think just general opposition, right? Like it's not just solely the sexism, like it's just so cultural and so pervasive. And she's a beast. She really is. Like if there's something that you need done, if there's a call that you need done, she'll figure out and she'll get it. And she has worked really, really hard. Now at this point in time, she would probably say, it wasn't all worth it, or maybe it was to her demise, because I think now she's finding the joy in other things in life. But I think, me kind of, her raising me, there was a lot of that influence upon me. And again, of course, the New Yorkism as well. But no, I appreciate that. And I think that I've always, as does she, like, I feel like we're kind of, at different points in my life, I've been more interested than not in true crime, but there's such like a curiosity element of it. Like if you've got a problem, like why? And I feel like that really kind of drives me. And that is why I'm very interested in offering tangible advice and also just making it worth it. You know what I mean? Like what help is really finite predictions for folks other than, them to nullify their free will and just give up that there's something that's going to happen that's not in their own control, which 100% I don't believe. Like now I think what's really good is that we're understanding like this sense of manifesting your own destiny. And so like, if that's the truth, then psychic information has really evolved from telling you what's going to happen to empowering folks to determine their own life. But with that empowerment, they need something else. They need kind of like advice and guardrails and guidelines and things like that. And so I think it's also necessary as psychic sort of practice and information evolves. Right.
And so one of your services that I want to touch on, you offer an array of services on your website, which is fantastic. One of them is intuitive development. So like what advice would you give to someone who thinks that they might have abilities too?
Buckle up, number one. Oh, it's so interesting. And it kind of depends because actually that's kind of like my most underutilized service at the moment. But actually I do have a client tomorrow who I'm going to be working with in terms of development because I'm kind of new-ish to the space. And I think that's also partially because I needed to go through my own journey. Like even it was really just going to be the blind leading the blind, like in the past. And so now I think I'm a little bit more well equipped and I think I'm more calm as well. Like I think I was a little bit more frantic. But oh my gosh, I think that the first advice is don't panic because I think what really is going to fuel the fire of intuition opening up is fear. And that is going to, one, drive you crazy, and two, really amplify not positive impressions of like what's happening. And so as much as you can just sort of just affirm an intention set. I am like releasing fear surrounding this process. Like I am protected. I have faith. I have trust. I am being guided. Like affirmations and intentions. I'm really a broken record. There's not like one thing someone can ask me that's not part of the answer because it's simple, it's extremely effective, and it also transcends conscious self, meaning that if you have subconscious blocks that are really preventing you from moving forward in some way, shape, or form, or you've just got old negative stagnant energy, it targets it like so easily so that you don't have to ruminate about what childhood traumatic experience that you had is preventing you from getting a relationship or getting the job that you want. Like just the affirmation in and of itself kind of does that work because you allow the universe to transcend it and release it versus so aggressively hiding it within your energetic body. And then it just runs amok essentially. So I think that one, acknowledging that this is going to be, or maybe a rough process and sort of just maybe acknowledging your fears and hopefully ultimately releasing them through meditation or things like that, but also like really, really dialing in on the affirmations and the intentions, which can theoretically be anything and everything that you want. But for a hot second, you're just going to need to kind of ride things out, which could be a little bit difficult. But, definitely, I think for me personally, finding some type of a community or a guru was really helpful because here's the thing about intuition. You really don't know, how effective your ability or communication is until you work with other folks. And like also granted, your intuition is still valid. So I don't want to say that it's all other people who are validating that experience, but I don't think I would have done anything with it if I wasn't receiving some type of feedback from other people. Like I would have no idea what to do with it or whatnot. So that was really helpful. I did find myself on Reddit offering readings to other folks, which take that with a grain of salt because Reddit is really the depths of the internet. So I don't think I always had like super positive experiences. So that's another component, just making sure that you're getting yourself out there. And it's really hard to kind of expose, quote unquote, yourself when you're going through this process because you want to be so introverted. You don't want anyone to see kind of like what's going on. And you want to close yourself off because the more open that you are to other energies and impressions. And that's sort of the struggle in and of itself. But I think sort of doing your best to release control and being like, okay, this is kind of arguably out of my control in terms of this process, but how I, show up for it certainly is. And I'm going to do my best to sort of not hermit in my house and just kind of get out there and continue living life and release things as it comes. But I think what a lot of people forget, and honestly, I forget as well, you can put boundaries around anything that you want. So when my intuition first opened up, I was like, I will not be seeing anything. I will not be seeing ghosts as if they are real, essentially. Otherwise, I'm not doing this because I don't want to be startled in that way. And I never have. And so, it might not be perfect when you first start doing this because sometimes there's a message that you need and it needs to come through in a certain way. But as time goes on, you really can control to a reasonable ability what's coming in, how it's coming in, and how you're kind of utilizing it. So you can also just just try it. Do whatever you want. I don't often recommend micromanaging the universe for relatively obvious reasons. You don't know everything that's going on. The universe does. Right. So best not to meddle with it too much. But if like you're just like, I'm really freaked out, I need like help, I am open to help receiving it, whether that be spiritual or physical or anything and everything in between. And, you know, I want this to happen, I don't want this to happen. I mean, why not give it kind of your best shot? But the biggest thing really is patience overall. So the trifecta is really kind of just like the acknowledgement and the ultimate release of fear through, you know, I guess like processing means meditation. Second thing is the affirmations and the intentions and your ability to kind of open yourself up and communicate with the universe. Then the third thing is finding that community, or finding other like-minded folks, and potentially even finding a mentor of some kind. I feel like that's the trifecta of intuition opening up, and avoiding watching too many tarot pick a card readings. That probably is going to add fuel to the fire. So managing your spiritual intake, because I think that you can easily be very over inundated by seeking out spiritual advice during that time. But yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. And you mentioned, so I do want to touch on, you mentioned you set the intention, you're like, hey, I'm not going to see any ghosts. I don't want that as part of my practice. So what are some other ways that you protect yourself and your energy? Because there's some evil, terrible things out there. So like, how do you kind of maintain, I guess, that spiritual hygiene?
I know this is going to be a really interesting question for me to answer. One, because this isn't exactly my forte. I tend to kind of be very stubborn about my current lifestyle and not wanting to do anything particularly different. I will say I've been like really into baths and Epsom salt baths recently, which I think has been really helpful, just like on a mental perspective. Even like with my current job, I just kind of need to digest. So like literal cleansing, of course, is really helpful. You know, I'll sage or Palo Santo the home every so often, but like that's more like mental stuff. I feel like I think now I've developed into a place where like universe like is pretty, they know not to mess with me, at least in certain ways. So it's going to be very unusual for quote unquote demons to be kind of like visiting me, like, because also, you know, negative energies and entities feed off of fear, and the fact that they either are acknowledged and they're feeding off of your fear, or that they're not acknowledged and they can be impacting and influencing you. So I'm basically not the ripe target for that, because I've released a lot of my fear in this process. And also I see you. I see what you're doing. So it's not really helpful. So I think, you know, it's hard to say that negative energies and entities have a point, but they kind of do. They help us learn and evolve. And like when I was going through my intuition opening up, there were times I was visited by a few negative energies and entities. And it was helpful for two reasons. One, to validate that they do exist, and two, understand how they operate. So a lot of like low vibrational energies, they really want something from you. They want to kind of like, now I'm getting into like that territory, but like there's kind of like a deal making in some way, shape, or form. But like there's a lot of like just like a lot of weirdness with negative energies and entities. And just think of it like negative people, right? They're always out for themselves. They always kind of like want to take something. Like everything in the spiritual world really mirrors the physical world. So, you know, it was actually helpful for me to understand more about negative vibrational energies and entities, whether they are alive or past. But in truth, yes, there's ways that like negative energies can manipulate their energy to look like something really wild. But at the end of the day, we still have evil people here on Earth. There's, besides them being dead, there's really not a huge differentiation. So, you know, there's definitely, if there's like a negative energy or entity that like is going to teach me something, or if, you know, I'm channeling something for somebody, there could be a really valid reason as to why they're around, and they can educate myself or them to pinpoint, like if there's like a negative energy that has a specific theme to it, clearly there's something going on with the client that matches or mirrors that theme. So, you know, I think when you start to acknowledge that negative energies exist overall, it becomes a lot less scary and a lot more useful. You know what I mean? It's almost like in like a diagnostic sense. Like obviously you don't want to have like a medical patient with a problem, but if there's a symptom, it teaches you about a bigger issue that's kind of going on, and the acknowledgement of it will actually help them heal ultimately. So I actually find that negativity or like negative energies and entities are inherently kind of valuable. And as long as you're maintaining your vibration, and you're learning from yourself and what's going on around you, and potentially negative energies, if that's the case for you, you'll stop attracting them, because they really don't have there's no learning lesson. There's no kind of like use case for yourself. So I think the most natural way to remove negative energy from your life, truly be your best self, not to be cheesy about it, but you can sage your life up and down every single which way. But if you've got something going on that's attracting negativity,
right,
that's something sage won't help with. So,
right.
you know, the truth is, which a lot of people don't want to hear, because I think a lot of people want kind of like quick fixes. There's something going on. There's a negative energy that you haven't released. There's a learning lesson that you need to overcome, which can only be maybe brought to your attention by something negative happening, right? Like we learn from negative things all the time. That's really the way to kind of like keep things out. But I think fortunately, you know, I've been relatively lucky that I'm pretty like quick with like moving forward. And so I think that because I don't dwell and I don't kind of ruminate, or at least as much as I used to, I'm able to kind of release things quite naturally. Where, you know, I'm continuing to move into different spots, and then energy is just no longer of use for me there, or it no longer can maintain its vibration. So I think that as I move through life, it kind of sheds itself. But, you know, all the things that I talked about, the like Epsom salt baths, the cleansing of the home, and just sort of, you know, any affirmations and intentions, you know, all of those things will help. But really it's the why it's happening that I think it will be really illuminating, and it'll be different for each and every person.
Right. So kind of on that note, what are some of your favorite practical spiritual practices that like anybody can do that you think are just super effective, just for anything, manifestation, keeping bad things away, et cetera, et cetera?
Ooh, it's a good question. Okay, so I'll do the like, because I can be like, meditation, like all of those kinds of things, but I'll do like the like slightly more interesting ones. I think, you know, one of my favorite things to do, which I haven't really tapped into in a while, and I think is relatively accessible for folks, I really find a lot of value in past life readings and past life regressions. As long as you're down for it and you're able to meditate successfully, you can find a guided meditation on YouTube and just kind of like go into that and just sort of like see kind of like what comes up for you. There's a lot of kind of learning lessons, and like a lot of times they'll mirror kind of like problems and issues that are going on with your life. And like, I feel like we're always just in a question of like, why am I like this? Or like, why is this happening? Or like wanting more information and context about the other parts of you, because realistically on the other side, time is kind of like, I guess, non-existent, I guess you could say. So there's things going on simultaneously. And this is like a really interesting way to kind of tap into it. But there's a lot of clues that I've kind of picked up on. You can also get, I mean, for example, myself, I offer like past life readings, even on Etsy, you know, that I'll be able to kind of share some information for you. And I'm sure there's past life readers who are reasonably accessible. But again, if you're already in the meditation game, like you can easily kind of do that. I think also the biggest question that I get from folks is, you know, I don't really know what to do. I don't know what happens next. And my favorite thing to do about that is envisioning exercises. So when you wake up in the morning or when you go to bed at night, you're a little bit more lucid. So if you've got multiple options of things that you need to do, say you want to choose a job, open yourself up to just envisioning, what is that job going to be like in 5, if you're there for 10 years or for 10 years. And even if you're not overly visual, what's the feeling that you're picking up on? Is it just a weird vibe? Are you kind of like, ooh, like even just like a tensing of your body can be really helpful information for yourself to know kind of like what that situation is and what that vibe is, and kind of reorient yourself. I think that we all absolutely have a sense of intuition, and we don't have to be psychics or envisioners or things like that to really get us there. So that's like a pretty effective one that I share pretty often. So I love the past life stuff. I love the envisioning exercises stuff. I also just think that Reiki is like such an easy entry point for a lot of different folks. Like if you're not really into the kind of more mental stuff and like the messages and things like that, you can really just seek out a Reiki practitioner. The other thing is you don't have to necessarily seek out a Reiki practitioner. If you're looking to kind of release old negative stagnant energy, another really fun tip is just, going to where your mind feels like you need to go on your body. Like I know that I have a lot of energy here. So immediately I'm just kind of like, oh, it's definitely here. Just placing a hand here and being like, I'm sending love here. I'm releasing old negative stagnant energy, or just kind of visualizing energy releasing from your body. All really easy things that you can kind of do on your own. This is also just like, this is great to just release density of energy. This is also, for folks who are on a weight loss journey, you can do that as well, just like certain areas of your body. I think that there's a lot of ways that you can take professional, even though, for example, I don't have a degree, but like more, expert modalities into your own life. Obviously use this with caution. Like this isn't necessarily something that I would recommend someone who has never gone through a meditation to do, like just diving straight into past lives. So, taking more control and taking things into your own hands is really where you want to be. Of course, like at the end of the day. So to work yourself up there, just start integrating different, like very basic spiritual practices, meditations, the affirmations and the intentions, maybe just like going to different spiritual things, whether that be like a Reiki share or a sound bath, or maybe like a tarot share or something like that, just getting your kind of feet wet. And then ultimately the goal is you're able to integrate these practices into your daily life or weekly life, whatever it may be.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure type of deal.
Totally.
There's one thing that I just remembered, and I do want to point this out because I want people listening to hear this. I think during one of our readings, honestly, a bit of advice that you gave me that has just stuck with me nonstop is if you feel drawn to something, you need to go do it. Doesn't mean it's going to, lead to grand success or whatever. It could lead to like a really interesting life lesson, et cetera, et cetera. But I do just kind of want to drive that home with people. Like if you feel drawn to something, you don't have to judge it or be like, that's, stupid, or, oh, why would I do that? Like literally go do it. Go text that friend, go sign up for that class, et cetera, et cetera. I keep saying that, but still, like, come on. That's just, I feel like I think about that at least once a day. And I check in with myself and I say, hey, what am I drawn to right now? Where am I being guided? So I want to thank you for that, because I think that is brilliant advice. And now that I have a podcast, I can broadcast that to whoever's listening.
Oh, I love that. And it's, it's interesting because I oftentimes don't take my own advice. There's a lot of things like that I feel excited about that I'm just like, I'll just like do that later, procrastinate. But it's 100% true. And I do want to say, like, I think the feedback that I get from that oftentimes is, oh, well, I want to go do something like negative or like bad or something like that. So like, what do you mean? Like, especially I hear that a lot of that rhetoric when it's like intuitive eating, like my intuition is telling me to like eat like 700 Twinkies. And I'm like, okay, let's just like take a step back for a second. Right. Because I think that, if every single thing that you're going into that excites you is something that would be, I think, objectively not a great idea, we just need to like chill out for a hot second and sort of really do that energetic purge and that energetic release, because you're just simply being driven by old negative stagnant energy, old trauma, old pain, old negativity. And then we just need to get ourselves to like a little bit of a better state and space. And all of the things that we talked about will help you do that. But, when you kind of objectively are like, okay, the things that I'm excited about, they're going to challenge me. They're objectively kind of like positive and helpful. And like, they are really like, aiding and assisting in my growth. 100%. Those are things you should really kind of jump on. And it's really hard because, I do genuinely feel like spiritual insight and creativity, it's so, if you don't take advantage of it, it'll leave. You know what I mean? Like there's that quote about like, I remember that Michael Jackson quote where he's like, if I don't like sort of execute the song, somebody else is going to, in the sense that like, it's almost like spiritual information and creativity and ideas. They're like all out there in the ethers and the universe, and you got to be the one to kind of like grab it and take advantage of it. There's so many things that I've thought of, like there's so many like video ideas or things like that where I kind of slept on them and I have them in a big notepad. And now I'm just like, the timing isn't right. It's just like, and not even that I don't want to do it, but it's like the time passed and like, now I got to do something else. And like, you do really wish that you took advantage of that, because maybe that video was a video that only one person needed to hear, or maybe that was relevant for the culture at that time. And now the moment is lost. And maybe even worse than someone else was able to take advantage of that, maybe no one did. And you would have made such a positive impact on the world in some way, shape, or form. And so it's a struggle because we live very busy lives, and we also struggle from, a little bit of self-confidence issues or imposter syndrome or things like that. And there's so many sort of elements against us to not create and execute and do, whether it's a creative project or it's just you're going off and doing whatever you want to do, like all the things that you were talking about. But it is true that sometimes things are kind of like once in a lifetime opportunity. And, I don't say that to sort of instill fear in other folks, but just remembering that, because sometimes it really is.
Wow. Oh, interesting. That's, it's like things just kind of lead to other things and whatnot, which leads us, see what I did there? Into the spooky portion of today's show. So please share your spookiness.
Yeah.
More so than we've already been, talking about this entire time. Anyway.
Which I'm just going to apologize because there's a few different things that are a part of this story. So if I'm rambling on, just cut me off. But it was really a challenge because I'm just like, what really spooks me at this point? Because I think it's probably not the same as other folks, doing psychic mediumship work. There's not much. Although I will say, if there are things that other people pick up on that I don't, then I'm kind of spooked by it. Like, oh God, what world am I not sort of like tapping into? But I'll share briefly kind of my experience in New York, where I was very much in a haunted apartment. And this was in my early 20s before my intuition opened up. So I think that all of these experiences were spooky in the sense that I did not know what was going on because I wasn't connected to my intuition, but also they were very overt in nature. You couldn't miss them is what I will say. Okay. So to set the scene, I rented a apartment in Brooklyn. It was in Crown Heights, and it used to be Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, or I may be butchering the name specifically, but there are a few buildings within that, under that kind of like umbrella. And so it was this grand building. It looked kind of old and, well, it was very beautiful in my opinion, but it used to be a hospital. And then they made it into apartments. And actually it had kind of a notorious history because I believe Albert Einstein received surgery there, which I re-Googled. So hopefully that is correct information. But yeah, so it was kind of like a notorious institution and it was big. Yeah. So there were a lot of people in and out of there. And at this point, I was probably like 6 months out of college, and I rented this place with my best friend, and she was also my roommate in school. So we had a great setup. We searched for a lot of different apartments, and it was very much like one thing not right, this thing not right. And we got in that apartment, which is kind of a fluke anyway. It was like a Craigslist ad that they got back to us like a few days later. We're like, this is not legit. But we go into this apartment, which was in the basement, mind you.
In the morgue.
Basically, literally. And we walked in and we're like, this is it. Like, it was like we had such traumatic like experiences finding other apartments. We looked at a place in Williamsburg where the floor was slanted. So literally like a ball would like roll down.
Nice.
other places where it was like in the middle of nowhere. And so, yeah, it was just like not working out. And so we were like, it's big, it's cheap. And even though it was in the basement, it did have windows, but like they were half, so half of it was kind of underground, half of it was not. But once again, it was cheap and we just moved to New York and we were like, we're taking it. And so there wasn't much to note about the vibe. I think it was maybe a little bit like, it could be like some tense energy just because, even though it's big, we're still in a basement. So it could feel a little kind of like just sort of constricted, but by no means was there any sort of haunted feeling in any way, shape or form. As we kind of lived there for, I want to say things didn't start to get weird till like 6 months, maybe even a year. And I was there for a totality of 4 years, but I started to like notice a lot of sounds happening that were just kind of odd. Sounds that included ambient keyboard typing, like someone was like, and it was like those chunky keyboards, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Where it was like, chung, 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 and I was like, what the hell is that? And anytime I went to investigate, it would stop. There was also a lot of sounds that would seemingly come out of my bathroom. It would feel like hustling and bustling. Like that's what it would sound like. Like it was just like so much like movement. And then when I would go and investigate it, nothing. Like it would stop immediately. There were times where I was in my room and it was like the loudest sound on earth where it sounded like my toothbrush would like fall on the tile, the tile ground. And like, just because of the acoustics in the apartment, it was so loud. And I went to go check, nothing there, nothing.
Oh, wow.
My cat would also park himself in the bathroom staring at it for like hours on end. And he would just stare in the bathroom. Yeah, it was very, very strange. We also had a slight mold issue in the bathroom, so maybe it was starting to happen. I think that was different. I think it was a spiritual activity. And it got to the point, and so I would hear things all the time. It got to the point, there was this one time I woke up and I heard this noise or this person say like, hello, name please. And it was so loud that I got up because I thought like police or firemen were at my door and no one was there. And what was really interesting about that specifically is that the tone of the voice sounded like, like at amusement parks where they touch that thing and it sounds kind of like the acoustic is just like behind the glass type of thing. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense because where we were, it wasn't exactly morgue, but it was where people would come in. Basically, like I would imagine it would be like an emergency room type of thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if it would be like someone asking for someone's name who was like kind of like coming in the hospital. And same for the keyboard sounds, that there were like secretary people and also the hustling and bustling. There's obviously a lot of people who would be coming through and even things dropping, things like that. It all kind of started to make sense. And so, yeah, I would just hear a lot of things. And then alternatively, there was also some movement in the home. So there were times, I remember this one time I had like my necklace in like a built-in soap dish. And I came like in the morning and it was on the other side of the room. And what was odd about that is that it would be like in a concave kind of like dish where there would just be no way that it would sort of go to the other end of the room. And like, I remember like, I was like so early in the morning and I'm just like staring and I'm like, okay, what, you know what I mean? Like, what am I supposed to do with this information? Like, it just, there's not much that you can do. So, there wasn't anything that was overtly, like, it's not like I was like seeing demons or anything like that, but it was just like weird things that you actually heard and that you actually saw with your own eyes. So it was very like, there was definitely some poltergeisty kind of things going on. There was one particular instance, and it was just so funny because I was very open about all this stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, the place is like haunted. My roommate was like, no, like nothing's going on. Don't worry about it. And something really, really frightened her. She was doing dishes one night and a dish, to her recollection, came out of the drying rack and smashed on the floor, and then a light bulb blew out. Mind you, I was sleeping this whole time. So and she told me the story and I was like, no, there's no way that that happened. And my assumption was that the drying rack was flimsy or something like that. And so
Uh-huh.
I remember I went, I went to work that day and I came back and I just kind of like was thinking, I was like, oh, look at this drying rack. I got to see what's going on with it. And so I started like putting stuff in the drying rack and trying to like get it to fall over. That thing was not falling over. Like this was like a, I don't know where I got it. Thank you to Target or wherever. I'm like, this is a sturdy drying rack. Like nothing is coming out of this. And I was like, she's right. There was no way that this thing was coming out unless it was flying out of it. And so, it's also funny to think about this because, when you say it in succession, I feel like people are like, well, why'd you just move from this place? Number one, it was cheap. But number two, I lived there for 4 years and I think I can count under 10 experiences that happened, which means that things were only happening maybe twice a year. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like it
okay.
wasn't that wild. So like, just in case anybody is listening and they're just like, why, you're so stupid. Why don't you just move out of there? And it's like, well, yes, when you talk about it all in a row, it seems like a lot, but it wasn't that much. But when it did happen, it happened. There was even one time where I was particularly stressed, and it was the first and only time I had sleep paralysis in my entire life.
Wow.
I woke up and I was on an operating table. And yeah. And it was like the vision, like I just saw the bright light and I saw people around me. And I knew that they were about to operate on me. And like, because it was sleep paralysis, like I was very lucid. So like I knew what was going on and that I wasn't supposed to be operated on.
Oh my God.
And so I was just kind of like, oh shit, like they have the wrong patient or something like that. And I don't know why I didn't connect the dots that like I'm in a renovated hospital, like that actually could have been a legitimate thing that someone, had experienced. But I just thought, sleep paralysis has all weird things happening. Like, of course, someone might be in a hospital environment. But then I was like, oh my God, of course. Like, of course, I was in a hospital. I felt so stupid that I didn't kind of like put those pieces together. But, I think about those times and I was like, I don't know if I would say it was haunted per se, just because those experiences were kind of few and far between. But what was really interesting was that, again, I was very vocal about all of these things happening. And my roommate was kind of like, besides, again, that one dish story. And several years went by. And we had a conversation again. And she's like, no, that's not all that happened. Like there was more stuff that happened. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like I told you all of these things that happened and you kept me out of the dark. And she was like, I was just freaked out. I was in such denial about it happening. But while I had mostly auditory things going on, she had just more motion things going on. So her items, similar to my necklace, would be across the room in the morning. And if you're like, well, maybe a breeze came in, which it didn't. Something very wild that happened was we had magnets on the fridge that would be on the other side of the room. So there would just be no way that would happen. Even though I had a cat, he didn't have the ability to do that. So I look back at that time and I'm just like, I wonder if that could have been a partial catalyst for my intuition opening up in California. But, it's just, I think what the really interesting thing about the story is, and, apologies for going over and sharing so many details about it, like everything kind of tracks in terms of the location that we were in. Like everything kind of makes sense. And I think that's what's particularly interesting about these spooky things, was that there was a logic to it at the end of the day. It was all things that probably transpired before we got there. And just the accounts on behalf of both of us, and just how intense, the experiences were, where they were in real life. They transcended the Matrix. Like we were seeing stuff on the other side of the room. I was hearing stuff that I was not making up. That was spooky. And so that, I think my entire time in that apartment was probably arguably the spookiest experience of my life, even though I was kind of chill with it. And it was still spooky.
Man, that's wild. And it's also kind of like what you said, only a couple experiences per year. That's kind of interesting because New York is a place that has so much history and so much energy, and you're in a converted hospital. You'd think it would be non-stop. But that's kind of crazy to me.
It's so true. And I think like every so often we would look to see like if other, because we were in like a Facebook group with like, because there were so many units in this building. And I think
the place is probably huge.
I hypothesize other people were having lots of different experiences. The other thing to consider is that respectively, we were probably drunk every single weekend. We were 21, in New York.
Hell yeah.
We were so wild. We were like just started our careers, and we were pretty, I don't want to say out of it, but we were always out of the home. Like we were always doing something. And I think that, would things be different if we were true homebodies where we were just so observant? Like that's the thing. Like I mean to say, not that we were literally out of our minds or inebriated, but like we were not very focused on like what was really going on in our environment. So like, on one hand, maybe that amplified the energy, because I do feel like when you have kind of like strong energy, things kind of go around you. But also on the other hand, would we have experienced more things if we were paying attention? Maybe. And maybe that's why the things, were so overt. Also, another consideration is with how intense those things were, that takes a lot of energy. So it's very possible that, maybe the energy that was there couldn't really sustain that level of intensity, and it could only happen every so often. There could definitely be a lot of theories, but it's very possible that for whatever reason, our little corner, because if you think about it, so much was going on in my bathroom. Maybe the folks that were next to me were having substantially greater experiences, but we didn't really talk to them very much. Because there was an apartment that was on the other side of my bathroom. And they had a couple of weird things going on. We didn't really see them very much. I think they ultimately, unfortunately, ended up getting evicted. And so I never really saw them. Maybe because it was overly haunted. That is a possibility. But, it's definitely possible that other areas of the building and maybe other different types of folks got it a bit worse.
Yeah, like for instance, the morgue.
Yes, exactly. Which we never, and like we knew that too, because there were ways to get out of the building, like underneath, like especially if you wanted to go on like the other side of the street. And so going down there, you knew what was going on, or at least that there was something weird happening. But yes, fortunately, I think the knowledge that we were not in the morgue, so to speak, but more in like a transient area, I think was helpful, because you certainly, one, don't want to be in a morgue, and two, probably don't want to be in a wing where there was a lot of suffering or there was a lot of illness. And while I'm sure people were not well when they were coming into like an emergency area, you could imagine that it was primarily healthcare workers and people who were kind of like in and out. So I think that, also speaking of like definitely the other areas of the building could have had very different vibes going on just based on what was happening in that hospital and who was there. So it would be really interesting to hear, because there were a lot of maintenance workers that spent a lot of time like underground, and of course other residents of the building. And I didn't really do too much research of what was going on with them, but I think we all just kind of probably acknowledge that it was haunted in some way, shape, or form. And whatever people's experiences were, whether they were consistent or very random or out of the blue, it might just depend what was going on with them or their environment.
Man, that's interesting. Because it's like in a place that huge, it's not like a blanket haunting, Exactly. Oh, that's so interesting. Wow, that's wild. So on this note, where can people find you online?
Yes. So pretty much everything that is Sarah's intuitive work. So SarahSintuitivWork. So that is my email. That is my website, my TikTok, my YouTube, probably other things that will crop up over time, but anything that is Sarah's intuitive work, you can find me. I think the easiest way to reach me would be by email, but I also post content, every so often. And again, you can find my services also on Etsy as well. So that's where a lot of folks find me for different types of readings, where it is, not one-on-one face-to-face. So that's a great option for folks who are looking for, just something fun in their inbox, or something serious, depending on what the topic is. I won't say that it's all fun. But I think those are the routes currently.
Great. So Do you have any last words?
My last words were, I'm so grateful that I was able to kind of come on and, hopefully I wasn't too rambly, but I love talking about this kind of stuff and I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you as a client as well. And I'm so excited for kind of your next guests and keeping on top of your podcast and hearing more spooky stuff. I think that this is just such a fun and interesting space and place to be. And if anyone's listening and they're on the fence with their level of spookiness, go all in, dive all in. This is your moment. This is your experience. But looking back on my life, as much as it was it was a time and not always positive, it's so much cooler to be on this end of the spectrum, to be in the spiritual world and the intuitive world. So I just send out positive vibes for other folks as well.
Hell yeah. Positive vibes all around. Thank you so much for joining me today. And on that note, goodbye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Spooky Butt. Music by Drew Mantia. Artwork by Lauren Seeley. Listen to Spooky Butt on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Please be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Follow Spooky Butt on Instagram at Spooky Butt Podcast. Need to make contact? Send us an email at spookybuttpodcast@gmail.com. We'll see you on the other side. Goodbye.